This program is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria. Welcome back to Business Daily here on Trust TV. Now, before the break, I told you we'll be taking a look at the National Industrial Policy. Yeah, it happened on Tuesday actually here in Abuja. So let's just give you a brief recap or brief idea of what this is about, and while we get our guests to join us, who's joining us virtually from Zaria. Now, Nigeria has officially launched the Nigeria Industrial Policy 2025, unveiled on February 17, 2026 at the State House. The policy is a flagship pillar of President Bola Tinubu's renewed hope agenda and represents Nigeria's most structured attempt yet to move from a consumption-driven economy to a production-led industrial powerhouse. Now, remember, the Minister of Trade and Investments made that statement when she was at Davos. We need to move from consumption to production. And I think this is what's happening now. This policy is mostly geared and moved by the Ministry of Trade and Investment. Now, what is the macro context of all this is that the positives is the International Monetary Fund. When we look at the economy so far this year, we see that we've upgraded our GDP forecast to 4.2%, central bank projected 4.49 growth, inflation trending downward at 13.35% projected, Naira stabilizing. Currently, some people's about 1,350 or so, 1,004 at most. Downward say petroleum refining product at 700,000 barrels per day. Now, of course, we have our concerns. Just earlier in the week again, the budget has over 20-something billion naira deficit. Where's that coming from? The 48% of revenue of that budget, when actually the revenue that's expected to come in, is still going to debt servicing. So these are the concerns. Now, of course, gas shortages that is affecting power generation, uneven private sector performance. Now, the NIP is designed to deal with these structural weaknesses. But away from that, one of the core visions of this was looking at certain segments, more about segments and sectors of the economy. And one of them we treated yesterday, which was the textile and garment industry. And there is so much more. Now, we're bringing our guest who is joining us from Zaria virtually, Professor Muhammed Muttaka. Thank you. Good morning for joining on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on the program this morning.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Thank you for joining us on the program this morning, Professor.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get to the conversation. I know earlier you told, when we were speaking, you said you were kind of brought in to consult on this Nigerian Industrial Policy 2025. Now, as someone who was behind the scene and hands-on on this launch taking place, what can you tell us about this and what it aims to achieve?
Yes, the industrial policy started in 2018 and culminating to what we have yesterday, day before yesterday. It was launched by the Vice President on behalf of the President. The essence of industrial policy is to give a directions, which that direction will now unveil how people will dovetail into various components of the policy. The beauty of this policy, it guides the investor and indeed the citizens on what areas are more viable in terms of investment. And the basic thing about it is to bring back to Nigeria to its proper roadmap of which development is assured. Because for any country to develop, it must have its industrial policy direct the activities of industrializations and the process of this development process. The content of the policy is outlined in 5 key areas in which, one, the objective principles of the policy, that is to say, One, there is a component of capacity building for industrialists and as well as a nation directions on what to implement. There is also restorations of institutional performance in terms of regulatory institutions. Those institutions are place a priority to address all the issues related to industrialization. There is also the issue of inclusiveness that allowed every sector, every part of the country to partake in the industrial process of the country. Other issues are innovations and in terms of reductions of particular interests within which various components of industrializations provide an input into the development process of the country. One of the things that is very important in this policy is the encouragement of competitiveness, and in that industries are allowed to show their comparative advantage in which it will be supported. And above all, the financial architecture to finance industrialization is also holistic in that regard. And above all, there is a monitoring and evaluation at which level you can evaluate the performance of the policy and to what extent you are on the road or you fine-tune the policy as you go in.
Okay. Now, you've listed quite a lot of things, you know, and it's a great thing. Now, I'm sure one of the ideas of this policy is the Nigeria First initiative, which is not the first time it's happening, but it's quite supposed to help us get there. But now the question is, we see a lot of policies come on. We see a lot of launchings, as people always say, some on our program. We have very good policy writers and policy makers. And the last thing that you said now, monitoring and evaluation. Do you think strongly, as someone who was in the hands-on on this particular one, that we're going to see some foot on the ground, implementation of these policies, taking us from consumption to production?
Yes, the beauty of this policy, it's not, it didn't come out from only the civil servant, and it create what is called a stakeholder engagement, whereby it makes sure every individual, every sector that's involved in the industrialization process of the country provide an input, and there is wider consultation and engagement with those stakeholders, and that provide the basis for ownership of the policy, whereby you will be able to say on my own part, these are the things that happened as a result of policy. Let me give you an example. When the policy process was going on, the issue of share not, the president provided a executive order to ban the exportation of share notes. And that's also give protections to those investors. And therefore, investment, if you find out now, the companies that establish to process a share note are making good effort in trying to add value in the process. So the essence of evaluation and monitoring in that aspect is all the stakeholders will be part of the process at which to evaluate the performance of the policy within their own sector. And there is a wide range of sectors involved, and they were involved in the development of the policy and also the implementation schedule of the. One of the things that this policy is different from others, it comes up with its implementation schedule and the targets, so that by that implementation, you will also evaluate the implementations with the target as well. So I am sure that because it's a holistic relationship that established with the stakeholders and the ministry and the other institutions of government, I'm very sure, I'm optimistic that this is not as different as other policies that has come. And it also, this policy took the aspect of the failures of other policy to bring in board, so that it provides the basis for us to make headway in terms of industrialization.
Okay. Professor, so I'm going to stick with talking about schedule. That's basically a timeline for implementation and targeting. And I want to believe that in a way, the timeline of this policy goes beyond the current administration of President Bola Tinubu, current tenure at the moment. Now, are there things put in place that, peradventure, if power to change hand come 2027, that this policy continues regardless of who is on the seat as the president? Because one of the issues we have in Nigeria oftentimes is when power changes hand, a new person comes on board, new ideas begin to float. Has anything been put in, on ground, put around to see that this policy, regardless of what happens, come February 2027, or depending on what timeline the Senate agrees to, that the elections will take place, that the policy will still stand?
Yes, like I said, in trying to develop the policy, there are all the stakeholders are involved in that process, and they have their beat on what concerns them. So this policy is not only a public sector, civil service developing a policy, but it is a collaboration between the organized private sector, companies, and also the association, manufacturers association, small scale industry. All the governments of those stakeholders have a role they play in developing the policy, so they know what worries them. Therefore, policy somersault at this level is highly minimized, because the contributions of every stakeholder is really valuable, and also indicates the responsibility and the role. The role of government at that level is in terms of establishing the regulatory institutions, strengthen the regulatory institutions, because the regulatory institutions are all there. And also the financial architecture will now guide the industrialists on what to partake so the change of government, by the time if peradventure there is a change in government, it will see the benefit of creating jobs, creating competitiveness, and also getting more money in terms of taxations on those industries. So it will be unwise to say, I will neglect what will bring more income to the country and create more jobs, and even to some extent will reduce the levels of apprehensions in terms of what the security, and in terms of joblessness, which is the target of every government.
Okay, now the keynote speaker for that event, if I believe, is Aliko Dangote, and he said something. He talked about power and how without no power there is no moving forward in any regard. Now, what part of this policy tends to address Because yes, you want manufacturing to do well, manufacturing doing well, bringing about maybe 25% of the GDP contributing to it. But power is a major factor to see that manufacturing does so well. So how is the policy coming to play to see that the power sector does its role in seeing that these other sectors do and play their role?
Yes, in terms of power, which is the key to industrialization, and we are having problems at which the power sector is at the current stage it is. And for us to be competitive, that power must be supplied to the required areas. So in that case, in the policy, it provides incentive for investment, because now every industrialist must generate its power, must distribute its power, and give a standby of that power generation is going on. So on that basis, the policy look at what are the incentives that can be provided for people who want to invest in the level of power supply, will also find a niche at which they can improve the supply. And more so, the industrialists also, the stakeholders basically understand that the essence of power is very important. So there is a need to engage in terms of what alternative source of energy we can utilize as we go forward in terms of the industrialization process. So the incentive there is what will attract investment into the power sector. And once that investment comes in, it will be a win-win situation for both investors and the industrials. And also in the policy, there is what is refers to as provision of common facility by providing export processing zone, and in that zone there will be provisions of common facility where industrialists can enjoy those common facilities, and which is the key issues in that common facility will indeed be in the energy sector and energy provision for industrialists to benefit from the policy.
Okay, well, that's one take a few of our guests on the program have had in the past, saying that it would be nice to have a industrial sector, a place, a common facility, as you call it, where people of certain type of business or industry could stay together and, of course, reduce cost on power. Now, one of the things that you mentioned, Nicole, earlier was talking about the share bottom. I'm going to go to two different things, look at two different sectors which are likely to be impacted by this policy. Now, one of them is the textile industry, which as of the 70s was a major employer of labor in this country and was giving quite, so much to the GDP of the country. But right now it's not doing so much, not doing so well, has very little or no impact to the economy. And of course the agro-processing part of things. Could you tell us what exactly are the steps that will be taken, especially for these two sectors, to see them come back up again, doing what they ought to do, contributing to the Nigerian economy?
Yes, in the policy, it identifies certain basic sectors which will have comparative advantage. And indeed, that sector creates a lot of jobs, and it creates a lot of income. And also, so part of it is the textile. The policy provides for specific incentive for people going into that sector. And to some extent, those sectors also will have a incentive to improve on the productions of those particular production process. And most especially, the policy also provides some protections in some of the areas which we have comparative advantage. If you look at it, the garment industry is a full lot. It starts from the agri side of it, to the processing, and to manufacturing. So all those three levels, there are incentives and guides to improve on the performance of that sector within the policy framework and policy incentive that the governments try to guide on those process. And in that case, we also look at within the policy how industries within certain sectors will be protected, and that is quite one of the cardinal objectives in trying to develop policy that stand the test of time.
Okay. Now, you mentioned incentives quite a lot in our conversation. Can you tell us specifically what kind of incentives we hope to see for investors in these sectors that want to come on board, that this policy, has? I'm sure there are tax incentives. Could you tell us more about them?
Yes. In terms of the incentive, one, it started with the financial architecture. We look at what is the problems of most industrialists is issue of finance. How do government come in and capitalizations of certain banks, for instance, Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture, all these are recapitalized in order to allow the industrials to access finance. And also it encouraged foreign investment as well for providing those certain incentives. But emphasis here is to galvanize the local investment so that it will attract the foreign investment as it were. So in incentive in the policy is quite a more holistic approach in terms of various components of the incentives that is required in order to provide that industrial development and Nigeria to develop as creating more income and job creations.
Now, let's talk about what we should see by at least this year. This policy is starting this year. So let's say, what should we see a year from now, from the launch? Let's say February 17, right, yes, 2027. Yeah. What should the milestones that we're looking at to see that this policy is not just a coming together of minds talking, but things actually being put on ground working? What are the milestones we should look out for?
Yes, one, we will see a macro changes in the contribution of manufacturing industry to the GDP, which is glaring that for a country to develop, the GDP growth must be enhanced in terms of the contribution of various sectors within the economy. So the industrial sector, one will see boost in the GDP contribution. Secondly, by more establishing more industry, it means that there will be more jobs, and therefore the level of job creation will increase. Other variables in terms of the performance of various sectors, in terms of the source of income, in terms of individuals and the government. You will also see revenue that increase from the taxes that collected from those industries. So these are the initial milestones that we can see. And also the most essential thing is the investor confidence that will be boosted, because any investor that is coming into the country will know where to focus on, and therefore it will improve the investment rating of the country within the shortest period of time.
All right. Now, one of the things you mentioned earlier was financing architecture, Bank of Industry financing. Yeah. They've given some money earlier, which the president actually, was quite proud of. But let's look at the 3 trillion naira that they're looking to give. Is it going to go around to everybody, or it's just to large corporations? Will SMEs be able to partake out of that money from the Bank of Industry?
Yeah, yes, certainly. Those the estimate of the policy suggests that it will galvanize the spending of about 3% of the GDP, and that means that by doing policy issues, will now be able to translate those policy into realistic and more formidable source. And like I said, the recapitalization of those two banks will provide a vista for accessing the financing by industrialists, and indeed the SMEs and even the nano sector that will access those finance.
One very, very important question, and which is, do you think, the Nigeria is industrializing, or we're merely stabilizing?
Yeah, because if Nigeria industrialize, it's Africa that, because it serves most fringes of Africa. West Africa entirely depends on Nigeria output. So if the output of industries in Nigeria improve, it means that the whole of Africa, because even the UNDP representative said in the launch that once Nigeria industrialized, it means Africa is finding its level in the global arena. And therefore, it is important that we take it seriously to the level it's supposed to be placed within the context of this process of industrialization.
All right. Now, non-oil revenues is one of the major things that the Nigerian economy intends to have, where we're moving gradually away from being fully dependent on oil. If all goes to well, this policy does so well. If oil eventually begins to underperform here in Nigeria mostly, do you believe and think that the manufacturing sector can fill in the gap of what oil used to give us as a country?
Indeed, it's common knowledge in economics that no matter how you rely on one single product as a source of revenue, you run into a problem. But once you industrialize, you are diversing the economy. You are making the economy so diverse so that there will be more income to the country rather than just relying on one. Because if there is more industry and manufacturing sector are performing, one, you have two levels of income in terms of the individual income, in terms of company income. And also, a government will now get revenue from the taxes of the company and the individual. So the company income tax and the pay as you earn for those that were employed will also add to the revenue. And in most countries that develop, in the serious sector play a pivotal role in generating income and revenue for the country rather than just relying on extractive. And within that also, the industrial policy also look at the extractive sector. An extractive sector, which is very vital in the industrialization process. It has a long value chain that can be exploited within that, and it will create a level of income that is desirable to take Nigeria to the next level.
All right, thank you so much, Professor. Before we go, do you have any final words considering the policy?
Yeah, my final word is that Nigerians and stakeholders should ask relevant questions in from the government, from their elected representative. What do you have? And this policy should also be expanded to subnational level. How subnational level will now exploit the provision of that policy, so also to improve their industrial standard within their own barriers of level. And that means that states can benefit. For instance, Lagos State has already gone ahead to develop a industrial policy which will soon launch. So I urge the state governments also to look at within those areas to carve a niche within the policy to benefit their people.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Muhammed Muttaka, for your insights on the Nigerian Industrial Policy 2026, rather.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
And that's it for Business Daily this morning. You've heard him. As a Nigerian, your role is to ask questions, relevant questions, ask your electorate what is happening. Of course, the subnationals should play a vital role in seeing that this policy gets down to them and, of course, affects the people in their states as well. That's it for Business Daily this morning. I've been your host, Chiamaka Nwafor. Same time, same place tomorrow. Bye for now. This program is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.